I know people here would set off a few rockets in the sky like fireworks if they would see a bump up in pay, right? Wages. What is the deal? Now, we've talked about this a couple of segments over the last few weeks just to get a better feel for it because we've been discussing, labor participation rate. We've been talking about jobs and the nice increase, the bump up over what was expected last month. But what about wages? Why do wages seem to be so stagnant? Or are they really stagnant? Should we be looking at this maybe in a slightly different way and talk about, the age and pay range and experience of those leaving the workforce and those who are coming in? That might be more appropriate for our jumping off point today with Clark Hodges, who's back on the show, financial strategist par excellence, to keep it en français. Clark, good morning.
Good morning. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Appreciate you being here. Wages have not been jumping. It's one of the indicators that folks say, hey, look, that means our economy's not doing so good, but the economy is doing pretty good. Wages aren't. Well, why do you think that is?
I think wages are a little bit better than they actually appear. I think statistics can be manipulated to make things look really anyway, but I will say that one of the things that probably hurts the average wage growth scale in this country is the fact that when baby boomers retire, they're replaced with younger employees or new employees, and those employees are going to come in at a base salary that is less than anybody that just retired. So I think that keeps that average down. And another thing that I think is considered when you talk about get a pay raise. Hey, so and so goes in, talks to their boss. I'd like a pay raise. A lot of corporations, a lot of small businesses are really anticipating what kind of tax break that they're going to get. And so most of this year, and my firm is a prime example of, we're sitting here thinking, we talked about it last night in a board meeting, we're sitting here making decisions, but we also have said, okay, if we get a tax break, will this decision be different? And there's a few things that will be different if we do get a tax break. So a corporate tax break. So I think those kinds of conversations are real. They go on,
right,
and that may delay any raises that may be going on for corporations.
Well, that makes that makes a lot of sense. But I want to ask you about this in terms of, let's say you're someone who's been with a particular going concern for a while, and maybe it's not just a mom and pop, maybe it's a little bit bigger. Look, it's never easy to ask for more money, but if you feel you're worth it, the old line before was, how do I go in and do it? I don't want to get, I don't want to have them get mad and fire me. Nowadays, there's going to be trepidation on the part of the person who's on the other side, isn't there, Clark? Who's not saying, how do I let them down easy, but to say, boy, if I don't meet some demands, we're going to have to go find somebody else. And that costs money. It might be better to give a little bit more, keep this person who's trained up and doing a good job. In fact, retention is huge. So the dynamic has changed a little bit with that ask and receive, hasn't it?
I think it's a very good point. The fact that from an employer standpoint, it's much harder. Not only much harder, but more expensive to replace an employee than it is to give them that pay raise. I would love to see a study on the percentage of gain, the percentage of people that walk in and ask for a raise. Do they actually get one? I would bet you, from a small business standpoint, that 80% of the people get that pay raise because, A, it's hard to say no. B, you don't want to lose that person.
Right.
You don't want them to go to a competitor, and you don't want to have to fire them because then you're going to have to go out and hire someone else, go through that whole enrollment stuff, and that's a time-consuming thing and a costly thing. And I think if employees knew the percentages, and if employees knew the viewpoint on the other side of the table of, I want somebody that's confident in their job, and I want somebody that thinks they're worth something to be working there. Because if they do think that, they're probably going to act like it and work like it, as opposed to somebody who is just there, doesn't want a pay raise because they're just kind of killing time, they're not actually working that hard. So it's almost like an incentive for, hey, we'll give you a raise if you show us how well you're going to do at the job. And that culture tends to be better at small businesses than anything else.
Well, I think that's spot on. I think that the way you frame that, exactly, the confidence to come in and ask for that because you think you're worth more, you represent us. I'm taking it you think the company might be worth more, and that's something sitting on the other side of the table that I believe myself. And if we're going to rise together. I mean, I think that's if that can all work out, and the fact you think that 80% are going to get a yes when they go in. Look, 10 years ago, that wasn't going to be the case. You're happy to keep a job, and you got places that were struggling to keep the folks on that they had. It was a tough time, but that time has changed. Are you convinced though that it's when I look at these numbers and you say the stats they tell us maybe a different story than what appears on paper, that some of that is boomers who are retiring at a higher skill level, some new people coming in at a lower end, and that you have to take that into consideration greatly when we're talking about wages?
I do think that's definitely a factor. I really do, because I'd say that the bulk of the employee pool out there are people that are actually working. The bulk of them are boomers, and the boomers are retiring. And so if you retire, you're going to be replaced with somebody that's going to come in at a more entry-level salary than a retirement-level salary.
Yeah. Clark Hodges, our guest. I know we got to let you go here, Clark. HodgesCapital.com. Pretty sure that's the place to go, is it not?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yep, we'll always do the mention here. Clark Hodges, our guest this morning. Always good to talk to you. Welcome back, of course, anytime. I know we'll chat again. Take care.
You.
Karen, where's my raise?
That is the question. Maybe you haven't gotten that little notch up that you normally get each and every year. To join us and explain why pay isn't rising much for many, financial strategist Clark Hodges. Good morning, Clark. We're asking the question today, where is my raise?
It's in the works, right? Is that probably a normal answer I get?
We'll see what we can do for you. It's not in the budget right now. Not at this time. We've all heard the excuses if we've had the gumption to even go ask.
Right. I think the gumption to go ask is very important in all this. I think you need to have that. I think you should work with a sense of, I'm a valuable employee. I work hard, I do a good job, and so if I come in for a raise, by all means, I'm going to get it. It's much easier for a employer to give a raise than to get a new employee. And if you're a good employee, they're going to give you that raise.
That's a good point.
It seems like there's a fine line between expecting that raise and working hard and feeling entitled to that raise. And I guess attitude can make a difference too, right?
Yeah, entitlement has no place in the workforce, and usually you don't even get hired if you have a sense of entitlement. In my opinion, one of the things our firm does is we have a good intern program. We successfully hired interns that have been with us 10, 15 years, but you get to know these people, and you understand their work ethic, and you understand if they fit in or not in your culture. And so I think a lot of times if you have an air of I'm entitled, you probably won't even get the job to begin with.
It's hard for a lot of people who lost their job in recent years and they go on to get a new job, which, of course, we're all grateful to have a job. But it's hard when you start a new job and you're making, a third or a half of what you made before less. And so you hope that you get a raise a little more frequently, but sometimes that doesn't happen. But going in to ask for a raise instead of just getting that 1%, 2%, 3% that sometimes some employers give, going in to ask for a raise is nerve-wracking, Clark.
Oh, I could see that. I think if you start your career with a sense of I'm having a long-term outlook here, but I'm going to work every day with a sense of urgency to show the most important person here, my boss, what kind of employee I am and if they can rely on me or not. So if you start your career and you work that way on a daily basis, I don't think you'll be nervous going in. I think you'll go in with, hey, it's just like me going to Starbucks and ordering a drink the way I want it. I deserve to get it the way I want it. And I think you go in and you say, I deserve this raise, or I wouldn't be in here asking. Don't go ask for a raise just because you think you can get it. Go in and ask for a raise because you genuinely believe you deserve it.
Clark Hodges joining us this morning on Memphis Morning News, a financial strategist. Okay, you decide you're gonna get a meeting with the boss. You go in and you ask. The boss says no. What what should somebody do next?
Accept that answer and evaluate your options. I mean, you always can accept and evaluate. And if you evaluate your options to be, A, I can go somewhere else, or B, I can prove to them that they make a mistake by not giving me a raise and they're subject to losing me, I think that's the best way to do it. You may hear a good reason why they can't give you a raise at this moment. And I think how you accept that news is key and is vital to getting that raise down the road, to getting that raise next time. If you act like an entitled baby, you're probably never going to get that raise. If you act like an adult who says, okay, I hear you, I buy into that, thank you for considering it, I'm going to do everything in my power to be the best employee I can be for your firm, and you go out of the office, I think you're setting yourself up well for the future.
And that's a notch in your cap as well, right? A feather in your cap. If you can accept that with class, right? That's going to show going to show you're in it for the long haul. If the boss doesn't see you stomping your feet on the way out the door, right?
No doubt. And any employer that's worth his salt is going into the office and leaving the office and spending his time processing and thinking about his business. And when he's thinking about his business, he subconsciously is thinking about the best people in his company. And so right away, when that employee walks in and that conversation starts, hey, I think I deserve a raise, within 10 seconds, that employer knows whether he's going to give it or not because he's already evaluated that person on an ongoing basis. You know, it's very similar to, dating. You meet someone for the first time. Within a minute, you know whether there's someone you can see yourself with in the future based on just very limited conversation. You know exactly that employee walks in, whether they're going to get that raise or not based upon what they've done in the past.
All right, Clark, thank you so
that on an ongoing basis.
Clark Hodges, financial strategist. We're up against a hard break. Thank you so much for this advice because it's not always a yes, and it helps to be able to deal with the no. Thank you, sir, for joining us on Memphis Morning News.
You bet.
8 years after the Great Recession ended, the economy is steadily churning out jobs. The unemployment rate has tumbled, but most Americans have not received a raise.
Joining us on the Kogo News Live line, financial strategist Clark Hodges. And Clark, why aren't wages keeping pace here?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. I think this year you could say, a lot of employers, a lot of companies are anticipating what the government might give us in a tax break, and they're probably putting decisions like that on hold, maybe putting them off a little bit to say, let's wait and see what we get in a tax bill from the government and how that'll affect us going forward. Another factor that I think is pretty big in tapping down the averages on wages are the fact that the biggest population of employees out there are boomers, and boomers, as they retire, are replaced by entry-level salaries, probably. So those salaries are lower, and you've got more of those coming online, and I think that's putting those averages down somewhat.
Now, are people afraid to ask for a raise? Because we've heard this, especially women.
Well, I think it's very much human nature to say, I bet the bulk of people are afraid to go in and ask for a raise. A lot of people are afraid to ask for what they want when they deserve it. They just need to have the confidence to, when you start a job, to say, I'm going to work every day as if the first time I go in and get a raise, it's going to be a no-brainer for that employee. I think from an employer standpoint, you want employees to have the confidence and the gumption to come in and say, hey, I think I deserve a raise, and lay out the reasons why. and have the confidence to do that. Because if you have the confidence to do that, you're probably going to work in such a way to prove that that was a good decision to give them that raise. And so I think you want someone that has that confidence in their job and that cares about their job. You have so many people today who just take a check, just go in, do a job, and take a check, really don't care about the company, care about the other employees, and care about doing a good job. And so I think that's a kind of employee you want to hire, someone who would have the confidence to come in and say, hey, I deserve a raise.
But are people still who went through the recession, are they still in the mindset of, I don't want to rock the boat, I don't want to ask for more money because I'm afraid I'll just be asked to leave?
Well, they might be, but I would say the chances of that are slim to none. From an employer standpoint, it's harder and more expensive to replace an employee who's been there 10 years than it is to go ahead and just give them a percentage raise right there on the spot. It's much easier to do that, cheaper to do that, than to say, okay, you're gone. Let me now go spend the next 3 months trying to find your replacement. When that replacement comes in, he or she's going to be probably put at a salary right around what this other person was making, but with the cost of health care and other things like that, if you're paying someone $30,000 a year, the cost to even hire that person may be $50,000 a year under the current health care plan and things like that. So it's easier to give that raise, and employees need to know that. By and large, I would guess, total guess on my part, but if you took an average of the people that walked in and asked for a raise, I would say 80% in small businesses get it because the people don't want to go out and hire a new person to replace that person.
All right, Clark, that's good news. So I think we should all do that today.
All right.
All right, that is Clark Hodges. He is a financial strategist with us here on the Coco News Live line.